Welcome to the X-Perts, your exceptional guides to all things X-Men. I am Jeremy.
I'm Joanna.
And I am Jesse.
We are doing this show in conjunction with Second Union. For more of the latest headlines and entertainment, please go to our website at wearesecondunion.com. I apologize that there was no episode last week. There was a technical error that was completely my fault, but we are back this week. How are you guys doing?
Doing all right.
I'm hanging in there.
Well, that's about all we can ask nowadays. I literally, we recorded the last episode, but the problem was before I shut down my system, I completely forgot to click save. Totally my fault.
Oops.
Yeah, I was an idiot. But we had a short conversation. Instead of skipping ahead to the next thing, we're going to go ahead and cover the history of the former X-Men affiliated character and sometimes supervillain Quicksilver, a.k.a. Pietro Maximoff. Also formerly a son of Magneto, but that gets kind of complicated.
Formerly?
Yes.
It shall be explained.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Believe it or not, this character first appeared way back in Uncanny X-Men number 4, back in March of 1964. Unfortunately, you can no longer get signatures by either of his creators because they're credited as Stan Lee and Jack Kirby.
Oof.
The character, since his origin, has been an on-again, off-again Avenger, and he's also had 2 self-titled limited series, no regular series of his own. Now, for those that don't remember, Quicksilver has a twin sister named Wanda, who's also known as the Scarlet Witch. Another long stay of the Avengers, who has her own very colorful history in Marvel Comics. Arguably a better one, but we'll let everyone else be the judge of that. Pietro and Wanda were raised by Django and Maria Maximoff. They're a couple from Roma. As adolescents, Pietro and his sister discovered that they had strange talents. And no, not the type that get you on TV because you can juggle really well. But Django began to steal food to feed his family, and once he did that, enraged villagers attacked the Roma camp. Using his speed, Pietro fled from the camp with his sister, and over the next few years, Wanda and Pietro wandered Central Europe and lived off the land. The next time these characters are seen are as part of the Brotherhood of Evil Mutants. I mean, really, if you're going to call yourselves the Brotherhood of Evil Mutants, it's not going to be a guess what your intent is.
Yeah.
The Evil League of Evil.
Well, they were on the Brotherhood following Magneto. On this team also were Mastermind and Toad. And the siblings were originally presented as mutants. Pietro was a superhuman speedster. Wanda was able to control probabilities. She's pretty much a luck alter without the special effects. It's kind of odd that she started out as being the Scarlet Witch, considering her first outfit was all green.
Yeah, I'm looking at that picture.
Which, ironically, isn't her daughter the one that wears all green? Polaris?
Oh, that's Magneto's daughter.
Oh, wait.
Half-sister.
Half-sister, okay.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I knew it was a family relation.
Let me see. The two of them, Pietro and Wanda, are recruited by Magneto after he saves Wanda from a mob because she accidentally causes a house to burst into flame. Quicksilver stays with Wanda to protect her. And after a few confrontations with the X-Men, these two decide to leave when Magneto and Toad are abducted by a cosmic entity called the Stranger. Which sounds like a very major PSA, why not to step into the cosmic white van.
Right.
Quicksilver and the Scarlet Witch travel back to Europe, and the two of them decide to reform and are recruited by Iron Man to be Avengers. They discover that the Avengers are advertising for new members, and basically Quicksilver and the Scarlet Witch have no support system. They have no way to earn funds. They figure this is a good way to earn funds and do something positive. They end up on a team of Avengers that's themselves, Captain America and Hawkeye. Comic fans call this era of the Avengers Cap's Kooky Quartet.
Kooky Quartet?
Well, yes, there's only 4 Avengers, and 3 of them are former supervillains.
Yeah.
It's a very unusual team when you think about it. Most of them, for the first time, are debuting as heroes.
Mm-hmm.
Hawkeye himself was a villain, even though he was kind of a bit of a mistaken identity at the time. His actions were mistaken for villainy, but he still had a record up until that point.
Mm-hmm.
Although things were not smooth at the onset, Quicksilver thought he should be the Avenger leader, and he would argue with the other members. It doesn't help that the Scarlet Witch becomes close friends with Hawkeye, And they become loyal members of the team until Wanda is accidentally shot on a mission where the Avengers are up against Magneto.
Huh.
And Quicksilver does what he does in all these situations. He grabbed his sister and ran away to protect her.
Mm-hmm.
It's turning into his move. He's the Jerry Smith of the Avengers. Let's see. Quicksilver and the Scarlet Witch go with Magneto back to his mid-Atlantic base where he captures the X-Men. This causes Quicksilver to fight directly with Cyclops. The twins finally realize that Magneto is the true villain, and then Pietro and Wanda reappear in the X-Men title while being kidnapped along with other mutants by Sentinels. They're subsequently rescued and freed by the X-Men. After this, Quicksilver reappears in the Avengers title and tells the team that Wanda has been kidnapped and taken to another dimension by a warlord named Archon. Archon is one of those weird Avengers villains that pops up every now and again just to remind people that his copyright should not run out. After Wanda is rescued, Quicksilver and the Scarlet Witch rejoin the Avengers. During a subsequent mission, Quicksilver is wounded by a Sentinel and is found by Crystal, one of the Inhumans. Black Bolt's sister, I believe. Crystal nurses Pietro back to health. We have a little bit of a Florence Nightingale thing happening here. And the two of them get married. Pietro and Wanda also meet Robert Frank, who used to be a World War II hero known as the Whizzer. It is only a coincidence that his outfit happens to be primarily yellow, I swear.
And apparently he was a member of the
serious?
Squadron Supreme.
No, that's a different Whizzer.
Okay.
The first Whizzer was a hero from World War II. He called himself the Whizzer because of the name his body made while it was cutting through the air. I'm not going to make that sound because it sounds dirty.
Yes.
Let me see. Robert Frank was present at Mount Wundagore, which was supposed to be the birthplace of the siblings. And Frank briefly joins the Avengers, believing Pietro and Wanda to be his own kids. The Scarlet Witch also becomes romantically involved with probably the person she couldn't be romantically involved with, the Vision. The android.
Mm-hmm.
Quicksilver initially disapproves of this, but he eventually gives the blessing to the two of them getting married. After this, Quicksilver is featured with the Inhumans and the Fantastic Four in a fight against the villain known as the Sphinx. I do not know this villain. The origin of the siblings is explored in the Avengers comic book when a Romani man by the name of Pietro Maximoff, you may recall that name, kidnaps Pietro and Wanda and returns to Mount Wundagore in the country of Trenzia. After fighting with the Avengers against the elder god Scython, the siblings learn from Bova, who is a cow woman. She is an anthropomorphic cow. Mount Wundagore is the base of the High Evolutionary. He is this weird being who does a series of evolutionary experiments. He's always looking for the next step in evolution in all sorts of biological things. And he tends to create these things called mutates. Just beings who have extra normal powers. Sometimes these evolutionary experiments come up with weird, anthropomorphic hybrids, and Bova is one of them. He refers to them as new men. Bova tells them that they are the children of Pietro Maximoff and not Robert Frank, so that ends that storyline. Quicksilver returns to the home city of the Inhumans, Attilan, and when he returns, he finds out that he had a daughter. Her name is Luna. Crystal's daughter. Don't think he had any other kind of relationships. He's just apparently been gone too long. After this, in the limited series Vision and the Scarlet Witch, Magneto forces Bova to reveal the truth about his missing children, and she says that his missing kids are Pietro and Wanda Maximoff. Apparently, their mother Magda died in childbirth, and the children are given by the High Evolutionary to Pietro Maximoff to raise as his own. When Magneto first tells the twins this, they reject him, and Quicksilver's marriage to Crystal is also strained when she has an affair. Crystal had the affair.
Yeah.
Crystal's uncle is also known as Maximus the Mad in the Inhumans. He uses a technological device to cause Quicksilver to become psychotic.
Ooh.
This causes him to frame the Avengers for treason because he believes them as having betrayed them, and he forces them to escape the government-sponsored Freedom Force, Mystique's crew. And Quicksilver himself is also part of a team of LMD-based duplicates of the Zodiac. The Zodiac are one of those villain groups that could be awesome, but they're generally lame. They're usually a bunch of people, sometimes with powers, sometimes with technological augmentations, who are... they're just 12 people who take their powers and their abilities and base them on different symbols of the Zodiac.
Yep.
The Vision is the one who actually manages to convince Quicksilver to stop doing what he's doing by showing him images of his newborn nephews. Somehow the Scarlet Witch had a pair of boys. With the android.
Huh.
How is that possible?
Magic.
Right.
It's later revealed that the Scarlet Witch kind of willed the twins into being because she wanted to have a family. Yeah. Anyway, after this, Quicksilver fights with the West Coast Avengers. I'm starting to sense a theme here. He's captured by the Inhumans and cured of his psychotic condition caused by Maximus. And as he attempts to repent for his actions, Pietro aids the Avengers West Coast versus Magneto and another villain called Immortus, who has captured Wanda. Immortus is one of the other aliases of Kang the Conqueror. And Quicksilver gets around.
Seriously.
Pietro manages to rescue the Scarlet Witch. However, he refuses to return to Crystal and the Inhumans and joins the U.S. government superhero version of X-Factor. This is a team led by Havoc. It has Polaris, Strong Guy, Madrox, Multiple Man, and Wolfsbane on it. Crystal and Quicksilver are eventually reunited during the Blood Ties storyline when the Avengers, X-Factor, and X-Men team up to stop a group of mutant terrorists kidnapping Quicksilver's daughter Luna and are responsible for a civil war on the island nation of Genosha. Genosha is an island nation that used to exist in Marvel Comics. When it started out, it was a bunch of humans who had enslaved mutants and were using them as a worker class. Eventually, the mutants did uprise and take over the island, and Magneto took it over and tried to make an island nation out of it. Then it was blown up by a Sentinel. 6 million mutants died in a single attack.
I hate Sentinels.
So do I, but this was a very extreme Sentinel. It's known as the Tri-Sentinel. Kind of a hybrid of 3 different Sentinels fused together that was created by Cassandra Nova just to punish mutants because she hated her twin brother that much.
Oof.
Yeah. There were very few survivors of the attack. A small group of mutants still lived on the island, but the only mutants I'm aware of that survived the attack initially were Magneto and Emma Frost. It was because of the attack that Frost suddenly developed their secondary mutation, Organic Diamond.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Anyway, back to Quicksilver. After dealing with the threat of mutant terrorists, Quicksilver learns of Crystal's relationship with another Avenger, the Black Knight. And it causes Quicksilver to say, F it, I don't need the Avengers anymore, and F it, I don't need the X-Factor anymore. He quit everything at once. Then Quicksilver takes his daughter and travels to Mount Wundagore and helps the High Evolutionary and his Knights of Wundagore against something called Exodus and the Man-Beast. That sounds like the best morning radio show ever. Quicksilver uses an experimental isotope called Isotope E to augment his own abilities, causing him to move at supersonic speeds. Then, for some reason, a future version of Quicksilver shows up, calling itself Nestor, and tells him that his powers are not speed-related, but temporally based. Somehow he's moving quicker through time. Quicksilver then rejoins a reformed Avengers squad, and with his half-sister Polaris, Quicksilver spies on their father, Magneto, who is now the ruler of Genosha, as we aforementioned. Quicksilver is banished from Genosha when he rallies the Avengers against Magneto. He just lives to disappoint people, doesn't he? Quicksilver, I mean.
Yeah.
This is where Quicksilver's history gets complicated. I know, it felt like it was, but this is where it gets really complicated. Are you familiar with the House of M storyline?
Yes.
Joanna?
It vaguely rings a bell, but I'm not coming up with much.
Okay, the House of M is where the Scarlet Witch used her reality warping powers to change the reality of the entire planet to ones where mutants are a majority and humans are a minority. I know, big complications, or connotations. But a large part of the storyline was undone because there was one screw-up. When the Scarlet Witch did this, she tended to give certain characters their fondest wish. Mystique, she was working for the betterment of mutant kind. Let me see. Captain America had actually lived his life as it was supposed to from World War II and was an old man now. Several mutants were just kind of living better lives at this point. I think Dazzler was a singer. Miss Marvel was the biggest superhero in the world. But the thing that undid her was when we got to Wolverine. Wolverine's fondest wish was that he could remember what in the heck happened in the missing parts of his life. So when the House of M happened, when he landed, he can remember the entirety of his life, including the original version of Earth he came from. So Wolverine became a catalyzing factor for the end of the House of M. But the other thing we found out was that the Scarlet Witch herself didn't cause the House of M.
Huh.
Quicksilver was whispering in his half-mad sister's ear and convinced her to create it.
Huh.
Yeah. This caused Magneto to get so upset at the corruption of his vision of mutants running the world that he used the wreckage of a Sentinel and crushed Quicksilver with it. Killed him. But because of the extreme amount of power the Scarlet Witch has, in her rage, not only did she revive Quicksilver, but she whispered 3 words that would reverberate through storylines for the next 5 or so years.
Mm-hmm.
No more mutants. She put the Earth back as it was, but at the same time, she also took powers away from 98% of the mutant population. This included major characters like Jubilee, Polaris, a large amount of the X-Men's B Squad. Mirage lost her powers too.
Magneto?
No, Magneto kept his powers.
No.
Quicksilver did not.
Oh.
Quicksilver ended up depowered. As a matter of fact, there was a miniseries following up called Son of M, where Quicksilver was so desperate to regain his powers, he actually stole the Terrigen Mist from Attilan, the things that give the Inhumans their powers.
Ooh.
And then, he didn't just steal the mist, he stole the crystals that generated them. He somehow absorbed them into his own body. It restored his super speed, and it also gave him the ability to restore the missing powers of depowered mutants. One problem was, it overcharged their powers.
Uh-oh.
A good example would be Eunice the Untouchable. He was a mutant with the ability to create a force field that nothing could get through, right?
Right.
Eunice was depowered as a result of M-Day. When Quicksilver restored his powers, his force field was stronger than it ever was. He was standing in a bonfire just because it entertained him. Then suddenly his force field turned opaque. His force field had gotten so non-porous it wasn't even letting in light. And if it wasn't letting in light, it certainly wasn't letting in air. Eunice suffocated within his own force field.
Oh.
Yes.
Yeah.
Several mutants accidentally died because of their powers being overcharged and uncontrollable. And eventually in the X-Factor series, the crystals are removed from Quicksilver's body by another mutant, leaving him powerless again. He was destitute and jailed for vagrancy.
Oh.
Then
of all the things.
Yeah. Then in a one-shot called X-Factor: The Quick and the Dead, Quicksilver has a series of hallucinations where he sees a woman in trouble and desperately wants to save her, and somehow that want kick-started his abilities again. He became a super speeder. He has a desire to become a hero. Quicksilver is seen again when the Mighty Avengers series used as a pawn by the Elder God Scython, who has reappeared, and I still don't know what in the heck he is. The Avengers defeat Scython, and Quicksilver's consciousness is downloaded into the body of the Vision before being restored into his own body. Quicksilver rejoins the team after learning that it's Wanda who brought the team together, except it wasn't the Scarlet Witch. It was Loki pretending to be the Scarlet Witch. Boy, was he ticked. And believe it or not, Quicksilver even got away with all the weirdness he pulled off, the House of M, the Son of M storyline, all of it, because after the events of the Secret Invasion, when Skrulls invaded and, some of them pretended to be Marvel heroes, he said that it was a Skrull who did all the bad things that happened in his name.
Oh, wow.
He just blamed a Skrull, yeah. Terrible, right?
Yeah.
But several characters were aware that he was lying, including the leader of the Mighty Avengers, Henry Pym, the Avengers butler Jarvis, and Quicksilver's own daughter, Luna, who was given the Terrigen Mist and was given the ability to detect all lies.
Oh.
Ooh.
Yeah.
Living BS detector. Got it.
Yes. Quicksilver begins wearing his green costume again instead of the blue one. And Luna actually lost so much respect for him that when he lies about the Skrull doing bad things, she would have nothing to do with him. Quicksilver eventually learns that the person he thought was the Scarlet Witch was Loki. He and the rest of the mighty Avengers travel to the Isle of Silence to set a trap for the God of Mischief. And they manage to actually imprison Loki in a device designed by Hank Pym. Then Quicksilver starts torturing Loki for information about Wanda's whereabouts.
Oh.
Loki has no information, and he manages to contact the one person who would fight through the Avengers to get him out. A lot of thunder was involved.
Oh,
Of course.
really?
Yeah. As a matter of fact, Thor attacked Quicksilver just because of the torturous ways he was treating his half-brother.
Of course.
However, Quicksilver's powers were mighty enough, he actually managed to outrun Thor's lightning.
Whoa.
He didn't beat Thor, but he did manage to outrun lightning.
Yeah. Thanks to all the death battles I've watched, lightning is about 2/3 the speed of light.
Yes. Yep. Quicksilver is one of the Avengers who helped Hercules and Amadeus Cho fight villains from the Olympus Group headquarters, which were actual, Greek mythological beasts who are running a fictional corporation. He even helped Wolverine defeat a character called the Huntsman by stabbing him through the chest with his own weapon. Later, Quicksilver is summoned by the villain the Ghost, using Amadeus Cho's technology to defend Asgard against the Thunderbolts. He defeats a character known as Mr. X, who is in the possession of the Spear of Odin.
Ooh.
Mr. X can't react quickly enough despite his own abilities, and Quicksilver beats him down with a piece of debris. And then Quicksilver is seen alongside the other Avengers fighting against the Void-possessed Sentry at the end event of Siege. After this, we have the Children's Crusade. Quicksilver is helping the young Avengers look for the Scarlet Witch. Wow, Quicksilver even goes so far as to abduct his own nephew, Wiccan, to assist him in finding the Scarlet Witch.
Wow.
He's eventually stopped by his other nephew, Speed, and his father has shown up. Magneto. Wiccan suggests that Magneto actually does want to make up for his past, which kind of makes sense. This is one of the first times Magneto has agreed, wholeheartedly to join the X-Men. This is during the Utopia era, where the X-Men were based in the San Francisco Bay under Cyclops.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Magneto surrendered to Cyclops and even handed over his helmet as a show of loyalty. And if you know the comic books, that's a big show.
Yep.
The thing is, though, when Wiccan suggested Magneto did want to make up for his past, Quicksilver gets angry and says, "Nephew, the last time I allowed myself to believe that, my father tried to kill me." See House of M and Crushing with Sentinel. Quicksilver gets ready to fight Magneto when debris from the Rampage hits the Scarlet Witch that they managed to find, and that's when they find out that the Scarlet Witch they've been chasing is a Doombot.
What?
Well, I know where their next trip is going.
Yep! This means the Young Avengers, Magneto and Quicksilver, all head to Latveria so they can rescue the Scarlet Witch. This is where they retcon the Avengers Disassemble event, where Wanda destroyed the Avengers before the era of the New Avengers. Instead, they managed to retcon it so that Wanda was being mind-controlled by Doctor Doom all this time.
Yay?
Yeah, that was a bad bit of writing.
Yep.
But the Scarlet Witch turns herself over to the X-Men and the Avengers, and a fight breaks out between the groups over who's going to do what with her. And after being knocked out along with the Avengers and the X-Men by the Scarlet Witch, Quicksilver is revived by the Witch, and they're reunited. After this, Quicksilver becomes a teacher! I know. Why this guy, right?
That's a change. Mm-hmm.
Well, Quicksilver becomes a teacher in the Avengers Academy. This was in the post-initiative era, when there were schools across America, or a school, for young heroes to learn to control their powers as well as be Avengers if they wanted to. He did this to distance himself from his own legacy as well as the legacy of Magneto. Except one of the new students doesn't want to learn how to be a hero. She wants to learn about his time as a member of the Brotherhood of Evil Mutants. Her name is Finesse. Finesse is one of those characters that has photographic reflexes. Like the Taskmaster, she can instantly replicate any move she sees. Matter of fact, she thinks the Taskmaster is her father for an extended amount of time. So, Quicksilver takes Finesse to an abandoned training camp, but instead of being abandoned, they find it still in use and capture criminals found there. Quicksilver goes back to the Avengers Mansion and finds Tigra, who is more than a bit upset because, Tigra was assaulted by the Hood and beaten nearly to death. Tigra is mad because several of the Avengers students took it upon themselves to find the Hood and beat him up on, in her name. So, during an exchange, Quicksilver managed to convince Tigra that kicking them out of the academy for trying to help wouldn't make them better people. It would very likely turn them into the next supervillains.
Yep.
Got a point there.
It is a good argument. So, Quicksilver is mentoring another character called Lightspeed as a teacher's assistant. Lightspeed is actually one of the members of Power Pack, Julie Power, grown up into teenage years. In a subsequent miniseries, well, actually, that doesn't matter. After this, Quicksilver joined the privately owned superhero team X Factor. This was one that was run by, I think it was called the Serval Corporation. And Quicksilver is confronted by a character named Fatal over the actions he did in the House of M and Son of M that caused several mutants to die, and he claimed a Skrull did it. Surprisingly, Pietro admitted in public that he was the one responsible for his own actions. He admitted that he was trying to avoid facing the consequences. But by making this admission, he finally got the respect of his daughter, Luna, back. She started speaking to him again. After this, we have the inversion. This is where we get into a bit of an aside. The Red Skull had stolen the telepathic section of Charles Xavier's brain from his body. And he had it grafted into his own brain. A telepathic Red Skull. The thing is, when you use Professor Xavier's powers for morally questionable and or bad means, that's when you get an entity known as the Onslaught.
Oh boy.
Because the Red Skull was using this, it became the Red Onslaught.
Of course.
And several heroes banded together and decided the best way to handle this is not to try to beat this thing into submission. They wanted to change the Red Skull's alignment, make him into a good person. So a number of heroes from different places jumped in to try to assist, as well as, oddly enough, a few villains who decided that destroying the world is not going to help anybody. Even Mystique, Sabretooth, and several others got involved in this. Okay?
Well, yeah.
So, several characters, including Doctor Doom, the Scarlet Witch, and Stephen Strange, got together to create this spell that would change the Red Skull's alignment. The problem is, the spell was too powerful. Instead of hitting one character, it hit an area around that character.
Oh boy.
Everybody in the area of it was changed. This is what's known as the inversion. This is the reason why for a while we got evil versions of Quicksilver and the Scarlet Witch. Why Iron Man went superior and tried to control San Francisco through very unethical means. This is also why we got Deadpool, the Zen monk. All this happened. We also got world-saving Doctor Doom and the White Skull and so many weird things.
That just sounds silly.
Well, eventually there was a fight to undo all this, as there is. And Tony Stark was smart enough to create a force field that would protect him from these effects. Unfortunately, two other people were in his immediate vicinity when it went off. That's Havoc and Sabretooth. So Sabretooth, for a while, he didn't feel that urge to murder anybody, and meanwhile Havoc was half out of his mind.
The podcast you're listening to is part of the Second Union Podcast Network. You can listen, like, and subscribe to all our podcasts by heading over to wearesecondunion.com. Thank you for listening.
But this also created something else. See, during the fight to undo all this, the Scarlet Witch was confronted by Quicksilver and Magneto. Not exactly a warm family reunion. And
whatever.
Well, I mean, look at it from her point of view. Quicksilver managed to fool her into doing the House of M, and Magneto had always been so self-righteous about his mission on mutants he'd never been a father. Okay?
Mm-hmm.
So the Scarlet Witch cast a spell to hurt her family. To her surprise, when she cast it, Quicksilver doubled over in pain. Magneto was just left standing there.
Oh.
Yes. This is the moment where it was revealed that Magneto is not their family.
You are not the father. See, I always thought that they were his kids. Like
they were for as long as I was alive until this moment.
Was this a retcon, or was this just like a red herring, or what?
I think it's a combination of things. I think it's a necessary retcon that Marvel at the time felt like they had to go through, because this is the period where Fox had control of all of the movie rights to all characters that were mutants. And Quicksilver and the Scarlet Witch, up until this point, had been steadfast Avengers. So I think this was like Marvel and its parent company, Disney, trying to retain control of characters by making them not mutants, so they had a way to use them in upcoming movies.
That's kind of dumb.
It's complicated.
Dirty.
It's complicated and it's dirty. Unfortunately, it also worked.
But did it ever get undone?
It still has not been to this day. As a matter of fact, Quicksilver and the Scarlet Witch went back to the High Evolutionary to get some darn answers. And what they found out is that Bova lied to them several decades ago. And the High Evolutionary basically told them to their face. They were a couple of orphans. He experimented on them and then gave them to some romantic guy. That's all he knows.
Wow.
So they are effectively mutates. This doesn't explain a whole lot of things that need to be retconned, like why would Quicksilver and the Scarlet Witch show up on Cerebro so many times if they're not mutants?
Right.
Anyway, eventually the second superhero civil war happened, and Quicksilver, oddly enough, he asked Wanda for help on this, but the Scarlet Witch did not want to get involved because they disagreed on which side was right. Believe it or not, Quicksilver was the one who sided against Captain Marvel and the idea that the future can be predicted, therefore they must stop the future with all means at their disposal. Quicksilver did not like the idea of profiling people based on what they might do instead of what they did do.
It's like Minority Report.
I know, but it's kind of odd to have Quicksilver on the side that believes more in free will.
That is true, but he is the impetuous one.
Yeah. Well, he's also the guy that's been judged very much for what happened in his past and what they could be blamed for in Magneto's name. So he's not very much of the idea of projected ideas of crimes.
That's fair. That's a fair point.
Wanda revealed to him that she was looking for answers about their true biological mother, a lady named Natalia Maximoff. They're the ones that she's the one that gave her babies to Maria and Django to spare them from a difficult life. Quicksilver decided not to go along, and the two of them did end up fighting, but the Scarlet Witch actually beat Quicksilver and told him she never wanted to see him again. There's a whole bunch of other things in here that doesn't make a whole lot of sense, so I'm going to skip over that if you don't mind. It's fine. A lot of stuff about Natalia's spirit summoning Quicksilver for their final battle against the physical manifestation of chaos.
Moving right along.
Yeah. Next time we see Quicksilver is during the Secret Empire storyline, and again, somehow Quicksilver finds himself on the right side, as a member of the Underground against Steve Rogers and Hydra. Quicksilver and Hercules actually lead a strike force to find cosmic cube fragments to try to restore Steve Rogers to his right mind.
Steve-ul.
It's the best way to it's the best thing to call it. I mean...
Yeah. Was that when he's a Hydra agent?
Yes.
Gotcha.
I'm one of those weird people that thought that was a fantastic story because it's a place we've never been before. Steve Rogers is leader of Hydra.
I've never liked that storyline. That's just, it's so at odds to everything Steve Rogers ever was.
I know, but to me that was always the point. We never seen Steve Rogers actually corrupted before. What does that create? I was intrigued by the possibilities. Existential
crises and everybody who's a fan of Captain America?
I was still a fan, but I mean, he did what he always did. He led Hydra to the win. They ran America for a short amount of time.
I like to pretend that doesn't exist.
Well, it's still there. As a matter of fact, Steve Rogers is a big part of the latest volume of Captain America. Not
I like to
physically,
pretend that
but
doesn't
the
exist.
implication that Steve Rogers and Steve Rogers are the same person is driving the kind of a confusion in America about the actual identity of these characters.
Mm.
Anyway, moving along, we also have the No Surrender storyline. There was a cosmic game between the Grandmaster and a new character called the Challenger, who supposedly was to be the Grandmaster. They decided to use Earth as a battleground. They removed it to a different dimension, and then they decided to take away the chaotic players on Earth, most of the Avengers, except for 6 or 7 of them. Quicksilver is one of the heroes remaining. He's one of the recognized Avengers. The others not in use or are not allowed are all being held in stasis. But when the Scarlet Witch tries to revive the Vision using her magics, it causes Quicksilver to be frozen in his stead.
Mm.
This process was later reversed, and because of Quicksilver's speed and the difference in his time perception compared to most other people, he's able to see this very fast beacon. And he spends the next few issues running after it at his best speed. He eventually manages to push himself faster and faster, catches the beacon, but it causes him to be displaced from this dimension. He actually ran himself into a different plane of existence.
Did he hit 88 miles an hour?
I think he might have actually hit the Speed Force.
That's what I was thinking.
He tripped over the Speed Force.
Well, I mean, a lot of people thought he was dead, but in a follow-up mini-series, Quicksilver No Surrender, it's revealed that he was stuck in an alternate dimension, but he eventually got himself free. And after this, there's not a whole lot of mention of Quicksilver in continuity. I've seen him in the occasional item, but not much since then. The unfortunate thing is, though, because of the retcons, it's kind of hard to classify him as a mutant, and it's pretty obvious he's not going to have anything to do with Krakoa.
Oh. I was wondering.
Well, why would he? He's not a mutant. He's not Magneto's son.
Yeah, but that's still really hard to separate out of my brain.
I know. Like I said, pretty much since I started reading comic books, this was my reality up until about, I want to say 2013. I think that's when the Siege was. And when that was, no, it had to be earlier than that, because this was before the Avengers Age of Ultron film. So this had to be like 2011.
Huh.
Wow.
Guess I missed a lot.
Well, I don't know. I mean, the one thing that we've discovered from looking through everywhere Quicksilver's been is that, I'm not going to say his history is inconsistent, but the appearances in a lot of comics are. Once he left the Avengers, he's just kind of bopping all over the place. He was in Avengers Academy, he was in 2 different versions of X-Factor, he was in the No Surrender event, he was in the Avengers United? No, the Uncanny Avengers book, the Unity Squad. He just kind of ended up in all these weird places.
Just like some kind of wanderer.
He is, and at the same time, his history screams Jerry Springer to me. I don't even know what to say about this character. Like I've said, a lot of the X-Men's history that we've reviewed has been very point A to B. These characters have very clear missions and very clear intents. Sometimes their end goals change, but that's only as the times change. Quicksilver's end goal is all over the place. The only consistency here is how much he dotes on his sister. That is very much a driving force in his life. The only time it ever gets worse is in the Ultimate Universe.
Worse how?
Think the Lannisters.
Oh, no, yeah.
It's never implicitly said, but the character's dialogue and the body language in the Ultimate Avengers comic books tells me that those two are way into each other.
I forgot about that.
Yeah.
And I'm going to pretend like I didn't hear it.
It's always hard to reconcile. But, yeah, that's the unfortunate part, is now that we've reached the end, even though the character has a lot of power potential, I think there's a particular writing trap when it comes to super speeders in comic books. They only really have one trick, and you can do some really interesting physics-bending stuff with it, but the only way to really push their abilities is to add a whole bunch of wacky side stuff, vibrating molecules to pass through objects and creating whirlwinds by spinning your arms, things like that.
Mm-hmm.
The only thing you can do is just kind of change the nature of their powers after that.
Mm-hmm. Well, given that his super speed is more or less classified as him some form of time manipulation, there's an opportunity to expand upon that and make him more, I don't know, unique among the other super speeders.
Maybe, but it also creates a bit of a problem because if his powers are temporally based, when does he start moving backwards and forwards through the time stream?
Let's be honest, Flash has already done that too.
There was another character, an X-Men character, and I'm sorry, I forget his name. I want to say his name was like Faster in another language, but basically the character wasn't moving super speed, even though people perceived him as that. Instead, what he was doing was speeding up how he moved through like the current temporal time frame. He slowed down time around him, but the problem was it also increased his aging as far as he was compared to other people. He kind of died as an old man. I mean, I'm kind of surprised this mutant hasn't been resurrected, except his version of super speed was so wacky, I wouldn't be surprised if they left him far down the list. And I mean that from an editorial standpoint.
All right.
But do you guys feel like you learned something about this character?
Yeah.
Kinda.
I still can't. I always thought he was Magneto's kid. Like that's.
Yeah, I was aware of the change, but that's only because I tried to follow the inversion storyline relatively unsuccessfully. I admit, I read the beginning and end of it. I didn't want to follow the tie-ins through the multiple series.
Mm-hmm.
But that's the way it is now. He is no longer a mutant, and neither is the Scarlet Witch. Well,
I'm not happy with this turn of events.
I share that. I don't know if a good way to do it, because you could undo the retcon, but that's just kind of more continuity mess.
That would just be more like DC than Marvel.
Ouch.
I didn't say it.
Shots fired. I mean it. Fighting.
Well, next week we agreed that we will look through the Inferno storyline, since it appears it's going to be a big player going forward in X-Men stories with the Hellions and everything.
Cool.
And it's taking me a while to go through it. That is nearly 600 pages of storytelling.
Wow.
I am working my way through it, but it is a slog. And I don't mean that in a bad way, but I mean, I think I've read about 9 issues of preamble to the story.
So it's just thick.
It's one of those cases where whoever put together the omnibus for Inferno over at Marvel, they decided to add in when the demons of Limbo started to infect the Earth, and all the issues that involve anything about strange things happening up to Inferno, including like things getting unnaturally hot in several places, apparently objects in different cities beginning to just come to life and attacking people for no apparent reason, and then meanwhile there's other stories happening. It seems to just be complicated, but we'll see. It's kind of scary to read the story and then realize that the Inferno series, or the Inferno event, is the first time I started reading X-Men when I was a kid.
Really?
I recognize these issues. These were the comics that I was getting my parents to buy when the Transformers cartoon was winding down and I was looking for a new story to read. This was my entrance point. It is so bizarre. But it does also cross over with a couple other things we read. Like I was reading when, in the preamble to Inferno, is when Archangel got his vengeance on Cameron Hodge, as we talked about in the first episode. This is also the point where Excalibur started to kind of fold back into the X-Men's life, and this is when the New Mutants were finding out that Magneto may not be as altruistic as they thought, and several other things that we understood is already happening. It's weird to get there.
This podcast is part of the Second Union Podcast Network. You can listen, like, and subscribe to all our podcasts by heading over to wearesecondunion.com. Thank you for listening.
Oh, to be honest, the further on we get into this, the more and more connections we're going to put together.
Yep. Who knows? Eventually we might actually understand it. But next week we will cover the Inferno event. Thank you very much for tuning in. I hope you've learned something on this weird romp. And I hope you tune in next week. I am Jeremy.
I'm Joanna.
And I am Jesse.
And you have just been expertly informed.